Happy Global CE Day. This is Tom Judd from CED, and I have the privilege of interviewing today Peter Grainger from Ireland. Peter, how you doing in the midst of COVID, brother?
Good, Tom. Hardworking. We're frontline clinical engineers based in acute hospitals, so each day is a challenge, but everyone's keeping up spirited.
Tell us a little bit about your specific job, as well as how many clinical engineering colleagues there are in Ireland.
Okay, so if I give you a brief overview of the health structure in Ireland, health structure is a state health structure. We do have private hospitals, but most of the hospitals are state run. So we have a health service board. It's divided all the hospitals up into acute and community. In the acute sector, there are 7 groups, and in each group there are probably 5 or 6 different hospitals. So I'm the medical device lead for the Dublin Midland Hospital Group. That's quite a substantive array of hospitals, in that there are an awful lot of the capitals, acute hospitals in there. I'm also head of the Medical Physics and Clinical Engineering, Medical Illustrations of Special Projects department within one of the hospitals in that group, and I quite busy person at the minute with COVID.
And I think you were telling me I was able to join one of your great BEAI National Society programs last year. That what, a couple hundred clinical engineers across the country?
So the number of clinical engineers in Ireland is 152. We did a survey last year, and it was quite a comprehensive survey, you know, anything from grade, qualification, age, years of service, name of department, title, etc. And that, I suppose, has given us a baseline. The last time something like that was undertaken was back in 2001. So it's given us a modern baseline by which to get an indication as to the clinical engineering demographic and spread and skill mix across the country. But typically 152. And clinical engineers at a technical level are called clinical engineering technicians, and at a graduate level are called clinical engineers stroke medical physics. So that's how Ireland is I suppose portrayed in terms of clinical engineers in conjunction with our fellow AHPs, so our fellow allied health professions, i.e. physiotherapists, speech and language therapists.
You guys did an amazing survey to know 152. That's crazy direct. I remember 40 years ago in the state of Florida in the U.S., I was one of 3. Of course, that's changed since then, fortunately. Peter, you've had on your heart.
It's funny to think in a lot.
Go ahead.
It's funny to think in a lot of the capital cities, for example, in the UK, you know, you might get in a trust 150 or 100 spread out amongst a number of hospitals just in one city. So we're a relatively small country, 5 million, and it's a relatively small profession within that country.
Well, you guys have always made a difference much bigger than your size. One of the ways you're making a difference around the world is directing CED's Health Technology Regulation Project, and that's been a passion of yours. Can you share a little bit about that project?
Sure, Tom. So I've been involved in standards and regulation for probably 30 years. At the moment, I'm the chair of the Irish National Standards Committee responsible for medical equipment in medical locations, and that mirrors the European and the international IEC standards. My thought was that it would be very useful to know how many standards pertain to the role of the clinical engineer around the world? And also, how many clinical engineers are involved in the drafting of standards and regulations? And in backing that up to write to the standards bodies and write to the regulators and try and get clinical engineers through the CED of the IFMBE more involved in setting standards and in advising regulators on policy from a clinical engineering hospital-based perspective.
Well, Peter, I know
so
that
that work is ongoing, and we've made a couple of strides in that. In writing to standards and regulator bodies, we're in the process of trying to find our level of ability to contribute.
Well, Peter, I know that work is already bearing fruit as you're talking about it. You know, we think about, so where can clinical engineers be involved in the whole life cycle, particularly from a regulatory point of view? And I know, you know, post-market surveillance has certainly been an area we've been involved in, increasingly cybersecurity. But now you're getting us involved in the life cycle management, which hasn't really been subject to a lot of regulation. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a key standard, Tom. The life cycle of medical devices, an awful lot of standards and regulation would be associated with pre-market or sometimes post-market activity, and more for the information of the manufacturer than the user. But there are a number of standards out there, for example, the life cycle aspects of medical devices, and also the maintenance of medical devices that directly impact on the lives of clinical engineers throughout the world on a day-to-day basis. These are standards that are the bread and butter of clinical engineers in every acute hospital. And we have a significant amount to say in that regard, and it would be appropriate that we are involved at a reasonable level in the development of those standards. We would have an awful lot to pass on by way of our experience and also our future insight as to the trends of development within hospitals.
Well, Peter, thanks for your moderating that session that CED did globally here in September, a month ago, on regulation, where we brought a lot of experts together and talked about these issues. I'm going to switch gears here, though, for a moment. I know you know, once again, you're, as you say, small number, but I think an important number of clinical engineers there have been working on the whole credentialing, certification, registration process for a while. And, you know, that's a big issue for clinical engineers globally. And so tell us a little bit more about your work there in Ireland.
Okay, so in Ireland, because we're part of Europe, a Professions Act was developed through the EU and implemented across Europe. So what that requires is it requires for every allied health profession to be registered. In Ireland, the government is in control of the registration scheme in a sense, in that they've developed a sub-board of the health system that reports via an indirect link back to the health department in Ireland. So to register, you have to be a nominated profession. Clinical engineers are in the queue to be a nominated profession. And in looking at, so we can't set up a registration scheme, but what we can do is set up an accreditation, a credentialing scheme. And that's what other allied health professions have done. So we've taken the guideline developed by James Weir and Mario and the initial group of the IFMBE. We've gone through it in detail, and we've outlined how we see we could develop a credentialing program for clinical engineers within Ireland without actually titling it a registration or it being something that would, I suppose, duplicating the European legislation. So we haven't done that. We've set up our own scheme. We've set up our own initiative. We did town hall meetings around the country, and we've gotten buy-in from the clinical engineers. One of the interesting things about our profession is that the Department of Health sets down the requirements for entry into our profession, and similarly so the interviews are competency-based interviews. So if you get through an interview, you've already had your qualifications checked, have had your competency checked. So we would imagine that the credentialing associated with a system like that shouldn't be too difficult, just in terms of paperwork and governance to implement. But yeah, we're quite excited. An awful lot of people have put a lot of hard work into it over the past number of years. We're at the stage whereby we need to know whether we're on the right pathway, or do we need to make a little feedback loop and revisit some aspects.
Well, Peter, I know this work,
well. Thanks very much for that, Tom.
You're welcome. This work is very important, and it mirrors, I know, what even Adriana's doing at WHO at the global level with, you know, the International Labor Organization getting recognition of the profession. So we're cheering for you there. And in closing here, we're also cheering for Ireland as they bid for one of the upcoming World Congresses. You want to mention about that in closing?
Yes, I mean, we have been involved with IFMBE since 97, so quite some time. We've always sent representatives to the World Congress, and we've taken a deeper interest in that over the past couple of conferences. We're keen in Ireland, having hosted a significant size bioengineering conferences. I think the last one held in Trinity College had an attraction of 4,000 candidates attending. So we do know we can deliver on something of that size. And we were looking forward to Singapore next year. We will be the year after, when we make our presentation to the bid committee, so that Ireland may get an opportunity to host the World Congress.
And so that's the IUPISM, which is IFMBE and the medical physics folks in 2027, hopefully in Ireland. Well, great. As a Scotch-Irish American, this is all good news to me, Peter.
Good, great. And we'll be looking forward to any Scotch-Irish visitors at any time. So, but the World Congress would be really good. And you're right, you did mention the medical physicist. We have already met up with the medical physicist organization in Ireland, and we're of like-minded thoughts. They're a member of IOMP, and they're quite keen to co-partner us in the challenge. We've already gone to the government as well too, and they've extended the welcome division of their branch, so to speak. It's called Fáilte Ireland, and Fáilte means welcome, welcome to Ireland. So we have the relevant partners around the desk at the moment, and we are planning for a bid. All exciting times, Tom.
Well, very good, Peter. Thank you for your time today. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.